Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam, hello, peace to you all, and welcome to Struggle Session 4. I'm Adnan Hussein, and as you know, this is a live-streamed monthly panel program where we wrestle with the issues of the day. As I like to say, we aren't necessarily here to make you feel better. We might make you feel worse, but the idea is hopefully to empower you and equip you for action. And as usual, we convene a terrific panel of guests with various perspectives across the anti-imperialist, anti-colonial left, including scholars, analysts, journalists, and activists. And we do it not just for the variety of different perspectives, but also to create some dialogues and discussions amongst ourselves and with you, and to be able to integrate different components of this kind of movement and online alternative media together so that we can learn from one another and act in more concert effectively together. So today, I'm really excited because I'm joined by a great group. Professor Jared Ball, Professor of Africana and Communication Studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore, host of the IMIXWHATILIKE podcast and channel, co-founder of Black Liberation Media and author of numerous books. It's great to have you on, Jared. Thanks for coming. And we're also...
it's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Not at all. And we're also joined by Nora Barrows-Friedman, journalist, writer, associate editor of the indispensable electronic Intifada site, and of course, co-host of the EI live stream and podcast. Nora, it's great to see you again.
So good to be here too with you all. Thank you.
And Benji Schoendorff is an anti-imperial, pro-resistance psychologist working towards a Marxist liberation psychology. And he's also co-host of a wonderful podcast where I've had the pleasure of being a guest a couple of times, Resistance is Fertile. They are audio podcast and YouTube channel that I love how they characterize themselves as a psychological support front for the anti-imperial resistance. Benji, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Adnan, for inviting me. It really is an honor. It's beautiful for me to meet Nora for the first time because I feel like you're part of my life. Seeing you kind of getting depressed with you every time you recount all the horrors from Gaza, doing this absolutely essential work for all of us. And I feel for you having to do it, and I feel depressed with you every week. And thank God for the resistance update from John Elmer afterwards, which kind of, makes us still believe in this anti-imperial resistance. And I think it was a month ago, someone in one of the comments in our fledgling podcast said, you guys should contact Jared Ball, whom I didn't know. And then I started binge watching your great stuff on IMIXWHATILIKE and so on, Black Liberation Media. So I'm just thrilled to be here with you guys today. And as a psychologist, I'm not the kind of psychologist whose mission it is to make you feel good at the end of a session. So I make sure that that's not my mission. I'm here to help us, all of us, myself and others, to just be more authentic at the end of the work together. And hopefully we can take some steps in this direction together today.
That's great. That's very much in the spirit of the struggle session. Nihal El Aasar couldn't make it because of decades of neoliberal austerity in the UK. Her train was canceled. She sends her regrets to everybody, but we'll have her on soon, maybe on a dedicated office hours live stream to talk about Arab politics, culture, music. She's a DJ. And also sport. So anyway, we'll check back in with her at some other occasion. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion because there is just absolutely so much to talk about, so much going on. I wonder if maybe we should start a little locally. for North Americans, which is a lot of our audience, and all of us are in North America, and at least half of us are in the U.S. So, it seems like there's been not only globally fascist rejuvenation politically, culturally, they're really asserting themselves, but particularly in the United States in much more open ways, because they've been using opportunities that have come to really drive a narrative, over events, and to exploit them in the media and in the popular culture. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these developments, our responses to how they're being portrayed in the media, and how right-wing discourses are exploiting them, and also, what are the ways in which we can and must counter these in our own fora. And before we go on and I open it up, I just want to say, if you're watching on X, please, retweet the stream. If you're watching on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. I'll tell you a little bit later how you might support the channel, and we should all talk about certain kind of causes that we want to support, organizations we want to uplift. We'll do that near the end. But for our first topic, as I said, dealing with this kind of fascist upsurge in the culture and in the media, and how it is exploiting various kind of tragic events in ways to advance a certain perspective. I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts about, maybe, it seems like there was a big shift. There has been an attempt to try and exploit some kind of narrative of increasing crime, in the United States, even though a lot of the statistics show that, there's nothing, particular changing necessarily, but there is an effort to try and portray society as extremely dangerous, to blame, liberal policy supposedly, for these things. And there was the case of a young woman who was a refugee from Ukraine who came to the United States, where there was a video capture of her stabbing and death. A real upsurge in certain kinds of perspectives and narratives, that we might look at these contradictions, between who is a worthy victim and who isn't, and the racial politics around those, and so on. And also the recent, shooting of a right-wing online commentator and activist on college campuses, Charlie Kirk, and the way this is being used to justify and authorize with greater vigor. I mean, it was already happening, but with even renewed and greater vigor and vitriol, authoritarian crackdown, and even wild talk about, civil war, and this kind of thing. So I'm wondering, what thoughts you have about the moment that we're in the United States and its resonances across the world. And, it wasn't the only reason for this large demonstration in London, Unite the Kingdom, kind of right-wing. One of the causes that they mentioned is, reacting to, the Charlie Kirk's killing. They had other, kind of points of propaganda and politics to assert. But you can see that it has some kind of resonance, both within the United States as a narrative, and also across the right wing, in the West. So I'm wondering, what thoughts you have about this, or reactions. How do we deal with this moment?
So
Everyone's all jumping at once.
yeah,
I don't know. I'd love to hear Jared's analysis before I give mine, for sure.
I second that.
All right. Well, so I mean, there's a number of things I think happening, starting with the media environment in the society that has been structured around the settler colonial project from day one, with very military intentions, and more recently that has been structured in many ways by the techno-feudalist, or as Hillary Allen calls them, techno-solutionist billionaire class that want to drive everything over the cliff with this fantasy that they're going to be left standing with us begging for their beneficence to with their good grace and technology and blockchain, AI, crypto, and social media be able to save us. And that has enriched an environment that was already fascistic and weaponized and white supremacist, already ready to valorize white death over everyone else's. So one white death is worth however many millions of the world majority suffering at the other end. And then, I don't know if folks like, for instance, Kirk's widow have recanted or anything like that in given all the new news about who was actually or alleged to have been behind this. But there's so much pent up anger. I couldn't help but, as I watched her, thinking, you have all this money and all this relative power, and yet you're so. Even it was clear to me in advance of her husband's killing, just so ready to pour out with anger. So whether what we're seeing in London or here or other parts of the world, there's this white rage ready and being again encouraged to respond, and then of course blame everyone but who was actually responsible, which is again the tendency. All of the inequality, all of the violence, all of the hostility is really driven by a handful of mostly ruling white elites and settler rulers, and yet everyone is encouraged to blame everyone but that group. So, and then ultimately, and I'll wrap here, but that the parallel, one easy one, because again, I echo Benji's not only praise for Nora and Electronic Intifada's work, but I do have a particular bias that admittedly is fed by John Elmer's reports. And one of the key features that I take away from it is the constant effort to demean resistance and what actual left politics and actual resistance means. So here we are seeing, after Kirk's killing, this idea now that the white male ruling elite are somehow the targeted oppressed community needing to step back out and reassert itself and defend itself against this a legendary organized left that is now weaponizing itself to a greater degree. I mean, it's all just it's a bizarro upside downing of the world. So the only thing that I'm aware to do is have conversations like this and encourage more offline grassroots organization and different forms of behaviors. We engage media, electoral politics, and everything else. But yeah.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is the unfolding of this project that I can only describe. I call it White Empire, but another name for it would be the Fourth Reich. And this Kirk character is the host vessel of this Fourth Reich. Horst Wessel was this essay activist who was also some kind of a poet or writer. He really would have been an influencer these days, like this Kirk character. And he was killed in a brawl, under kind of shady circumstances in 1930s, and became the kind of martyr to the Nazi cause. There's a horrible song that bears his name that, I wish I could erase from my brain. Unfortunately, that's not possible. But you're seeing this, and with an empire, and when we had the conversation with Radhika Desai, what really hit me is this is not an empire like the British Empire that actually ruled the world. This is an empire that kind of manipulates the world. It's a would-be empire, but it doesn't actually have the means to rule the world. So it invests even more in narrative control, right? And the narrative control, the way it invests in it is by deliberately killing our sense of reality. Like even this Kirk story, it's just this infinite amount of kaleidoscopic rabbit holes. You can look in every direction. If it's like this or like that, you could spend the next 2 years just investigating every little rabbit hole and come out of it with absolutely no certainty about what the hell was going on. And there is something that feels deliberate to this kind of impossible to know the reality of quality. And we need to think of what we do in terms of what is our place in the narrative war. And I often said, maybe because we're very small, that it doesn't matter how small you are, it doesn't matter how small your voice, it doesn't matter if you're around the water cooler or if you're on one of our big channels. Think about this narrative war, and you have all this kind of fake everything on the one side, which is the narrative control of the Fourth Reich or the White Empire, and on the other side, 2 clicks away, is the reality of a live stream genocide. And we have absolute heroes like Nora, who every week goes to the whole thing and then reports on the actual reality of it. And I think that reality-based quality to our waging this narrative war is absolutely essential. We have to face this reality, and it's really hard. As I say, my heart bleeds for you, Nora, because sometimes I can't even listen to your report. It's just too much for me. But then you have to have the thought, okay, it's too much for me here, and I'm in the gentler, kinder genocidal settler colony of known as Canada, but what is it like if you're actually on the receiving end of it in Gaza, on the West Bank? But this is the reality we are facing, and we must, resist being sucked into these narrative black holes. And by the way, Jared, I want to say there was a Black Liberation Media reaction to this thing, and it was beautiful because there you had a community who's like, it's just not playing the game. We know who this guy was from the beginning, and we're not going to get drawn into either mourning, of course not, but even debating the details of this fucking rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, while both of you were talking, I was struck by the parallel, kind of like this narrative that that Zionism has perpetrated and has, in particular, played out in the Western, European colonial Zionist communities here on this continent and in Europe, and I was struck by this inversion of reality where, for years, not just in the last, 72 hours or whatever, but for years, white, upper class, conservative, extremist, right-wing Christian white nationalists have portrayed themselves as the victims, as, the real oppressed, a looming minority, in this country or whatever, and it's been the fuel to kind of fill voids of that capitalism has created in terms of alienation and all the things that we know about how capitalism operates psychologically. But I really remembered Sheryl Sandberg, who was the former CFO, I think, of Facebook and Meta. And when she made those egregious propaganda documentaries about, the supposed, mass rapes of October 7th, and that, of course, never happened. And every single victim or witness that she talked to has been thoroughly debunked, and none of that has been recanted at all, of course. But I remember when she was interviewed about some perceived anti-Semitism in the U.S. She said that she was walking with her friend, and her friend, and they were talking about, Jews under attack in this country, which is a complete fantasy. And Sheryl says, and I turned to my friend and I said, "Would you hide me?" Yeah, exactly. Would you hide me? And she really
She cried. She
cried.
wept and she cried and she broke down.
Yes, and this is like the liberal version of the white Christian nationalist, male, alienated male sort of syndrome, is like this collective delusion by billionaire Zionists or even just regular middle class Zionists in this country who literally believe that Hamas, whatever that means to them, is going to parachute into their fifth graders birthday party in Sunnyvale, California, because they are intent on killing Jews, because they are motivated by this extreme hatred of Jewish people wherever they are. And meanwhile, these are the same people, literally the same people, who are sending weapons and funds and their own sons and brothers to kill children in Gaza as a way of marking their territory on this colonial structure, as a way of engaging in this ideology that has been entirely constructed out of empire for empire. And so it's just, it like you feel like your brain is constantly breaking, whether it's, the federal government mandating half-mast flags, to mourn their boy, or the European Union leaders. Wait, not even, it has nothing to do with this country. Also taking like a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk, while there is a slaughter. I mean, the most horrific slaughter you can ever imagine, that has probably ever happened to human beings because of the amount of weaponry and technology and surveillance and political cover and not just cover, but encouragement, happening. Yeah, just like the next tweet away. It feels like you are losing your marbles, and I don't know where to put that. With this, I mean, it's kind of been for me, and this is kind of going into like Tankie therapy land, but like for me, I've just had to. I'm not even like, I can't even think about this, what's happening with the right wing and the consolidation of power and the manipulation, the collective mass manipulation against marginalized communities, to blame trans folks, to blame the left, when it's, of course, it's one of their own, when it's always one of their own. I don't know. I can't even really like deal with it because I'm just so kind of laser focused on Gaza. But it's just, it just kind of strikes me as there's so many parallels happening here. This inversion of victim versus oppressor narrative, and it drives me insane.
But if we're sorry, Adnan, but I know, but if we're all honest, we all do know that Hamas is on the other side of every gate, armed with their critical race theory and their trans ideology, and Mexican immigrants ready to take everyone's jobs and attack everyone in their beds. So these folks have every cause for being concerned. Because I could.
You only forget the fentanyl. You only forget the fentanyl there, Jared.
Oh, right, fentanyl. Yeah,
the narco-terrorism.
The narco-terrorism.
About that too.
That one boat.
Also, besieging our communities. Yeah, but I mean, I think this is really interesting to be witnessing, thinking about. Also, what its consequences are. I mean, I'm with you totally, Nora. I think the problem here is that there's such parallels between the politics of victimhood by the settler colonial, white supremacist, or Zionist oppressors, the way that they have managed to invert the discourse so thoroughly and so totally. And occasions like this allow them to try and, kind of characterize the one case where something has happened, to this fascistic, propagandist, to turn this into some kind of like white victimhood, American victimhood, etc. And of course, to see the intersections between our political elite exploiting this to create some sort of occasion of public mourning through which to put in place, authoritarian crackdown upon actual free speech, and in the name of, a martyr for free speech, and what was said by Israeli government figures who, in addition to the Europeans who, like, what business is it of theirs to really think about like some online figure from inside the US, political culture, and to characterize this as a political assassination. I mean, it's only because their, politics is the only politics they seem to understand is the politics of the culture war. So they've turned him into a political figure in that sense, as if he was some official or elected official or party leader or something. But like to see the, Smotrich and Ben Gvir and Netanyahu, talking about him, it's because it is the same politics. And it's because the whole placing of Israel within, and somebody had put the comment of the crusading countries, which of course is just such a leading thing for me as a medieval historian to say that Israel is so much like the position of the crusader states, and the West is a crusading coalition. It just reminds me so much of the larger transnational structures that bring these elites together, and in such parallel politics. And so I think that's something quite interesting to see and to recognize. But I think one of the other consequences is that the right wing is always capable, it seems, of putting everybody else on the defensive and using strategically this kind of propaganda to push through their narrative and put everybody else on the defensive. I mean, you're totally focused on Gaza, on the genocide that's happening in Gaza for obvious reasons. It's like the world history is being made in this contest right now. Like the fate of the world, in some sense, is tied up with how will forces align. Will it be allowable to simply eliminate in view of everyone a whole population for the sake of a vision of a supremacist, divided fortress society, marking off the haves from the have-nots on a global scale within societies, etc. I mean, this is the model that is being contested in this anti-settler colonial resistance. But the point, here is that by, kind of seizing upon this moment in the media, and with the liberals going along with it so thoroughly and so totally, is that it reduces the space actually for talking about what's going on. It does two things. One is it reduces the political space and the attention right at a moment when we're on the cusp here of, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be effective, but there are opportunities to put political pressure on Israel with the UN, Craig Mokhiber, and we could maybe talk at some point a little bit about a very interesting article that he wrote for Mondo Vice and your interview with Ali on Electronic Intifada, with this international human rights lawyer who's been involved at the UN at all levels, who left his position and, is saying there is an opportunity to put political pressure at the UN General Assembly. Well, all of this stuff is off the table because we're supposed to be worried about some, online figures, killing. And so that's one thing that it doesn't, but also is the divisions that were starting to happen, it seems, within the fascist right wing. I mean, there were some kind of openings. It shows that those can't really easily be exploited. I mean, the only alternative is really popular socialist, organized, left, because these are very unreliable kind of, people, because their culture war agenda can be activated so easily, so quickly, and so thoroughly to try and heal these rifts that we're opening up over U.S. foreign policy and grievances about, the social compact that's been, undermined,
So,
So anyway, I'm wondering what else you
yeah,
think in
well,
reaction to this. Go ahead, Benji.
if I may, I come at it from a different way. First, I want to say, there will be rifts in the right wing. I'll tell you why. Simply because it's really hard for Nazis to be bossed around by Jews. Let's face it. It kind of rubs some of them the wrong way, and they will always react in some sort of way. But it's not a real political movement. It's this reaction. What I think has happened is the moment, the contradictions have heightened to the point that all the liberal pieties have been washed away, and my own liberal pieties have been washed away. I turn around, I go, oh, I thought these people were left, but they never were. And the project was there. To me, white empire is a settler colonial project of European whiteness, which, as we know, is a shape-shifting concept, and it comes to a land where there is a people, there is a civilization, to just get rid of it, turn everything into this big void, build franchises, and get rid of humanity into some sort of transhuman what, I don't know what, and then colonize Mars. So that's the general movement of the thing. But it's always been the same way. I saw this quote from George Washington, and where he said that his instructions was against First Nation to lay waste to all the settlements around, that the country may not be merely overrun but destroyed. You will not by any means listen to any overture of peace before the total ruin of their settlements is effected. Our future security will be in their inability to endure us and in the terror with which the severity of the chastisement they receive will inspire them. So that is from the very beginning of this, white empire settler colonial project. And we've been put to sleep by this liberal talk, which always was anti-communist anyhow. And we're just seeing things as they really are today. And I wouldn't, it doesn't make me defensive, it makes me offensive, because the contradictions are there. People are still having trouble, putting food on the table, getting an education, getting a job, and these contradictions are not going anywhere. And people know that, 2 clicks away, there's a reality of a live stream genocide. Somebody mentioned, some troll mentioned Ukraine earlier. Well, for the past 9 years, we've had this slow creeping rehabilitation of open Nazis. Well, I call them Unter-Nazis, because even the Nazis, found the Banderites to be kind of a little bit too much for them in Ukraine. And it's a general movement, but against that, you see that people are resisting. There are majorities in every single imperial country, let alone in the global majority countries, against this thing. And we need to remember this, because, these narrative mirrors are there to kind of make us lose contact with the actual material reality that we're all facing. And narrative wars are great and all, but at the end of the day, when you find yourself on a battlefield, whether in Ukraine or in Gaza or whatever the battlefield they open up, well, Twitter threads don't exactly win battles, right? So we need to remember this. And one last point, and it's horrible for somebody outside of the struggle to say it, but every single national anti-colonial liberation movement, they've all said it, the cost is atrocious. I mean, it's in millions. Algeria, which, being French, I know much about, was like 5 million or something. Vietnam was 4 to 5 million. Every single place, if you want sovereignty from this mad death, white empire, the costs are going to be in the millions. And that's the sad reality of it. But we shouldn't, we shouldn't lose track of the fact that the struggle is happening, and in the bigger scheme of things, this empire is going down.
Indeed, yes, very important points, and history is a really important guide in these contexts to see. If we want to find out what it's going to take, we can look back. I mean, their conditions always change. You have to look at things in their particular context, but it is something of a guide that it's a big, big sacrifice to defend your sovereignty from a settler colonial regime. I just want to remind everybody, if you're watching, it's been great to see so many excellent comments in this very lively chat. Great remarks, people really engaging with the comments, and a lot of appreciation for the remarks of the panel. I just want to ask you to if you are watching, like the stream and share it, so that we still have a little bit of time. Maybe some comrades, friends, colleagues, even enemies may come in and benefit. We had our first big troll, and I see that as a sign of success, that we have touched a nerve somewhere among some people. But do like and share the stream and retweet it. Well, we started talking a little bit more about the situation in Gaza and these links and connections. There have been some incredibly important developments in thinking about what is the real geography of Greater Israel. Suddenly, it seems that it's from Tunis, to Doha, right? So we've had, in 1 week, there were attacks on Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, Tunis, Qatar. I may even be leaving, someplace out, but we're seeing a really rabid, militaristic regime that is totally rogue and out of control. It makes me think of that Kissinger quote that I think isn't actually perfectly accurate in terms of the context in which he said it or meant it, but I think it's too good and too true, in fact, to dispense with, where he said it may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. So I think some people in the Gulf are finally perhaps starting to learn a little bit about the, risks and dangers of ignoring the true, real enemy that they're facing and the character of this conflict. I wonder, if we have any sort of thoughts about what's happening both in Gaza, but also the way in which it seems to me that the continuing resistance, and we hear about it, of course, as Benji mentioned, as something that helps us deal with Nora's news section about the devastation that's taking place, by at least hearing that there is resistance continuing on. I mean, even just this last week, there's responses to attempts to take Gaza City. This has been announced for, maybe it's been over a month, of the impending, wiping out of Gaza City. It still hasn't happened because of the brave and heroic Palestinian people refusing to leave their homes, and because of the brave resistance that is courageously continuing to confront it. So we have that situation continuing on amidst mass starvation. That's an enforced starvation and siege. It really reminds me of a medieval siege, where there's absolutely no compunction about starving innocent children, women, all civilians, in an incredibly criminal way. But even also this bombarding of the people that supposedly are there to negotiate, a ceasefire that is proposed by the United States and the Trump administration, but clearly just for the purpose of luring people into a location in the open where they could be attacked. And again, this is medieval. So we have Israel constantly trying to characterize itself as defenders of civilization. And of course, what they mean is Western civilization. They're very open about that, that they are defending the West and as a frontier state. But you don't find, this being allowed or condoned, except in medieval context. Even in medieval, that's unfair to medieval states. Actually, they respected the rights of envoys, to be protected because they serve a very important function in allowing negotiation to take place. This has been cast aside as well. So we're really in an incredible moment where it is impossible at this time to maintain any of the fictions of the liberal internationalist order of law, of norms, and so on. And I guess the real question that I have is, are people going to, and our states, the neighboring states and other states, really going to wake up and understand, what they're facing?
I would love to think so. I do not think they will. I think, Qatar hasn't cut off any of its, normalization efforts with the entity. It has continued to help the Israeli Air Force refuel its jets. There has been no indication that there's any, diplomatic cutting off of relations between the two, or between, Qatar and the US, of course. It really, Israel and the US for the last 2 years have been moving goalposts, if we want to use that horrible analogy, in order to figure out what the red line is. And at this point, there are none. They have been able to do anything they've wanted. They've killed heads of state. They just killed, remember, they killed the Yemeni prime minister 2 weeks ago, and
His whole
nothing.
cabinet, 11
His whole
ministers.
cabinet, exactly. And not one, Western state supposedly engaged with the, international rules-based order, all of this stuff. No one said anything. Israel was allowed to assassinate, Ismail Haniyeh in another country. Israel has assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, obliterated the entire building that he was in, carried out airstrikes every single day since there was a so-called ceasefire 9-10 months ago, whenever it was, 11 months ago. And it's been able to carry out a full-scale slaughter, bragging that it is a genocide and an ethnic cleansing operation, bragging that they are breaking every single, moral norm and rule to do so. And now they have killed the, members of a negotiating team, and people in a host country that is, normalized with it. And there has been no repercussions. I don't know what that says about the future of any sort of political norm, any sort of, ability by, the power elite to be restrained. I think we are in a new world where, it is now proven, as scholars, as resistance fighters have always said, that even if you normalize with the enemy, even if you offer your political autonomy up, to the entity, to be able to ally with the West and with Israel as the tip of the Western colonial spear, they will still massacre you. They will still kill you. They will still punish you. Even if you surrender, they will kill you. And I think that it just proves once again that is the correct analysis, and that is why the Palestinians are not surrendering. That is because they know surrender is death, and they will keep fighting because it is their obligation to their people and their national project. So I don't know. I don't think there will be any repercussions politically for Israel's strike on Qatar. Qatar will probably, as one of our friends said the other day, Adnan, Qatar will probably apologize for being bombed.
It's like that dude that apologized to Dick Cheney for getting shot in the face on the hunting trip. It's
100%.
It's the micro. That would be the microcosm.
I'm sorry, my face was caught in the crossfire. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to be in the way, and I apologize. And you know, all I would want to add just quickly is that just to make again one of these micro to macro comparisons with what's going on in this country. I mean, Charlie Kirk, who, from what I understand, also oddly would have had his own beefs with the right wing over the Zionist entity and its support for it, which is oddly funny. But he, Benji sort of mentioned it. He is himself a product of the settler colonial project here needing to expand its cultural imperial work. I mean, he was produced, forced, and imposed on the public sphere as an ill and undereducated, unaccomplished, very under impressive. I mean, it is the epitome of the white male failing up, just unimpressively promoted to the highest of heights to specifically perform the confusion and the dragging farther to the right of the public sphere in this country, so that when and if any of what Nora just described penetrates that umbrella, it's immediately distorted and turned into something that can be used against itself. So I mean, that's why the immediate aftermath of his killing, the first thing out of everybody's mouth was, this is the product of the left wing and their violence and their ramping up this, that, and the third, which is again the microcosmic equivalent to if you happen to hear about anyone in Yemen responding, it's because they are innately savage, and this, that, and the third has nothing to do with the fact that, as you just pointed, wipe out an entire prime minister and the cabinet and stuff like that. There's no, or that for however many years, Israel and its allies have been performing all manner of madness in that region. So it's just the immediate narrative switch that is super powerful. And in this environment that has again itself been intentionally created, it can fester so easily. So whether it's an appropriate analysis to what happened to Charlie Kirk, or whether it's an appropriate call for some sort of punishment for this allegiance to the Zionist entity in the so-called Middle East, it's hard. I'm trying to connect these issues, but I'd see it's very difficult to expect that the appropriate response will be encouraged, and when it doesn't appear that it would be properly challenged, because so much has already been done to poison the discourse. And then the last part is that even when we see, for instance, well, at least from where I'm familiar with in this country, poll shifts in support of Palestinians, the attendant absence of an appropriate political structure to enact the will of the people again inhibits any actual progress. So we may have the ability to gather here in forums like this and offer up a counter narrative and some other forms of analysis to the dominant imposed one, but we struggle to find an appropriate cooperative, collectivized media parallel or balance or negation of what they're doing. And then when we try to act out politically, we find our own version of what we see the extreme cost of happening in Palestine right now, of an absence of a political option. So again, what are we supposed? We're being encouraged at least to wait for another couple of years to vote for another genocide supporting militarist who's going to come with the message of change, or and this is so in terms of how you describe these sessions, these struggle sessions. This is where I struggle a lot lately, is how to enact and make material what is our actual interests. And I struggle to find both media and then even more so political apparatus that's going to convey that, because the Democratic Party is not it, obviously. And so anyway, so I'll just stop there.
Yeah, that's the central question, right? What is the political translation of that moment? But to me, it helps to keep a broader picture. And, the best analogy I can think of is like the breakout of World War I, where all the so-called left went pro-imperialist, and, what would then become the communist movement that eventually, swept over Russia in 1917 was vanishingly small. I don't even know how many people were at the Zimmerwald conference, of anti-war social democrats, but it was like such a small number. And what I think, we must remember is when we look at the big picture, and it's important to have a political economy analysis of what's going on, the big picture is this empire is done. It's lost economic supremacy to China, hands down. Even China is hiding how much it's lost it. And, it has an interest to hide it, and China has an interest to hide it. So we don't really know, but it's incredible. Just look at shipbuilding or what have you. It's lost military supremacy clearly to Russia, most likely to China also, and on some fronts to Iran, possibly. It's lost moral supremacy to the genocide, and it's on its last legs. And because it's not an empire that is actually ruling everything, but that is using this, complex network of satrapies and narratives and stuff, the whole edifice is always on the brink of collapse. And there will come a point where all these satrapies will switch side. I'm not saying it will be tomorrow in the conference about Qatar, but at some point, everybody's seeing the writing on the wall, and nobody wants to be the first one to stick their neck out because they know the empire will go nuclear. So they have to manage the decline of it. But we need to remember this, because when we look at the broader historical picture, when we take our backsides out of this narrative ass of the empire, this is what is going on the world over. And then the question, and I don't think it can be solved online in a way, the question is, how do you evolve the kind of political organization that can resist this? Clearly, we can't do it online because they're listening to everything and all the rest of it. But we need to be aware that this organization will be outside of our online spaces. In our online spaces, what we can do is struggle with the fact that it has to be out there, but at the same time, there's something I find extremely positive. If you go back to the model of the social democrats, the socialist, the communist movement, it used to organize an alternative society. You had the party newspaper that gave out the political line, but that's not possible anymore. We have access to information. We all have to evolve our own bullshit detectors, and that, as it's a double-edged sword, but if we look at the positive side of the sword, it allows us to cut through and to make up our own lines. And then what we can do is put out the fact that organization is not done on the internet. You organize with people in a way that learns from all previous resistance movements. There's a lot to learn, I'm sure, from the Palestinian resistance in terms of this kind of non-hierarchical structure in which you have leaders that surely have an influence and an impact, but you can get rid of them and the movement still will evolve its own leaders, its own. And this is done by, putting the information out there. I'm not even going to say the political line. It's the information, the resources that people can latch onto and then evolve their own ways of resisting. Whether the revolution will come from the belly of the beast or elsewhere, I'm personally agnostic on this particular question. I would be very surprised if it came first from here, but you never know history. It's tricky a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Nora.
I mean, I just wanted to kind of echo what you said, but also kind of infer my own struggle on this too. Is like, I mean, reading history, reading, the ways in which a colonized, occupied population have kind of spontaneously sometimes just had enough and rose up and overthrew, the power structure and were able to drive out the colonizers and reclaim their own sovereignty. They had various means and every geography, every context is different, of course. I struggle with trying to figure out if that can happen here. I mean, in my little social circle, and in my household, we're consumed with Gaza. We're consumed. We are, we're doing, normal everyday things as well. We have to go grocery shopping. We have to pick the kids up from school. We have to drive them to baseball practice. And there's this cognitive, split where we're all, we can't stop watching and our hearts can't stop breaking and we can't stop this rage. And for me, coming from that context, I'm like, well, it wouldn't take that much, if we all like channeled our rage and we all had a plan and we had a political movement to stop these weapons manufacturers, to stop, the flow of technology, information and surveillance, network matrices. And, we can stop. It is possible. There are bottlenecks, there are levers, we know pressure points, that, all of this. And then I I shake myself awake and I'm like looking at everybody else. Even here in the Bay Area, which is, nominally, historically progressive or even left wing at points. And nobody's watching what we're watching. Nobody's feeling the enormity of it. And then you kind of widen back the scope even more. And it's like the genocide isn't existing for people. They don't, even if they see it, they don't care. And I just, I don't know. I struggle a lot with how valuable is it for, in terms of our time and energy to try and rehabilitate a long dead actual leftist movement. I've been involved in trying to rehabilitate at various points some sort of political, cadre organization. I don't know. There's the revolutionary optimist side of me, which is well, of course, and it's going to happen, and we, it is necessary. It's an intervention that people have made before and can be made again, and especially in the belly of the beast, this has to happen. And you read all of these, one incredible essays and analyses by scholars and activists who are like, yes, it can happen. This is how we can do it. This is how we build the left from the ashes. And then there is the intellectual pessimist side of me that's like, not with these motherfuckers, not in this atmosphere. And so where does that leave us? How do we channel our energy? What is the actual struggle? What does it materially look like in these conditions? And that's where I'm feeling very, very kind of like I'm in like one of those like closets where it's like simulates a tornado, at the museum. That's how I feel constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the big question, what Jared raised, that we've been struggling with actually in each of these struggle sessions is, well, what's effective? What's the way in which we could be contributing to some solutions? Where is it going to come from? And so on. And I do think that, we are dealing, since we're on alternative media such as it is, with whatever limited, audience we manage to get, dealing with the suppression of these algorithms, and so, by the way, like the video people out there, do what you can, even in a small way, is that, we have to still figure out that you can confront the media narratives. And now we may not have like massive audiences, but it seems to me that if you're thinking about any vanguard group of organizers, activists, and others, they need these kinds of resources of knowledge in the media fora for really thinking out these political ideas, and also reinforcement. The groups that are actually willing to kind of take a risk and do action, whether it's direct action or protest, or, to push BDS in their church group or in their workplace or their university, those people need the reinforcement, because everything in this society is militating against taking a stand. As Never Nude says, the worst thing is saying something about the genocide and seeing people's eyes immediately glaze over as they change the subject. That's what we're dealing with, even with well-meaning people, who care about people in their community and are liberals, but they're just, so afraid, and they don't want to be radicalized, because normal life, what you were just talking about, Nora, is something that there is actually become rather precious. They know that there are a lot
That's
of
liberalism, right?
Yeah, that's liberalism. Constantly feeling the insecurity that you're kind of carefully held together, normalcy could fall apart, and then you would be like those people who are really suffering in your society. Everyone's frightened of that. And so we're dealing with, there are a lot of people who want to do more. One thing that, at least in media terms, on these online fora, is at least keeping people's sense of commitment and dedication, energy, a sense of community, because you often feel very alone when you go into any of these spaces, in your workplace, in your university, in community groups, etc. You feel alone. You're the only one who wants to bring up these uncomfortable subjects and topics. And it takes a lot of reinforcement and a sense of solidarity to actually take those risks. So that's one thing we can do, is arm and equip people with counter narratives, counter views, and give them that sort of support. I guess it's what, Benji, you would call the psychological support front. In a way, is how do you keep an activist group? Look, it's been 2 years. Okay. It's a miracle that the resistance in Gaza is continuing. It's a miracle that the Yemeni people have not given up on their outstanding world historical solidarity with a people suffering genocide. It's a miracle that even, that there are still people going out into the streets. I mean, Benji, you were just at a we see the images of people flooding the Vuelta de España, the tour of Spain bicycle race. They've had to change the route of the of the race, because there are so many crowds of people waving Palestinian flags and calling out the genocide, and the organizers for allowing the Israeli Israeli athletes to be participating. There is actually a lot of political energy that is still out there. I think what we're struggling with is seeing the results. And of course, it won't seem like we're being effective. I'm always self-critical and saying we have failed. We haven't done enough. We need to figure out new ways. But we're not going to see the results until the results, right? This is the thing, is that the media propaganda, the elites, they want to do everything to say you will fail, you can't change this, you can't do anything. So, at the very least, we have to say, yes, we can. And as somebody said, that it won't happen if we don't try. So it may not be the global north. It may not be the belly of the beast where, the real transformation happens. However, we don't know until we organize and become more serious and effective, and try. And also we can sap political will, which is important in, the first world, in the industrial north. And it just seems to me that there is a huge opportunity here because, my generation, I don't have a lot of faith in my generation, but I see a lot of young people who really, really care. And this is transforming their ideas about what's possible, about what the future holds for them in capitalism. And they are getting the picture that it holds nothing for them. And so there has to be some radical change. Now, whether this can be transformed and directed into effective political revolutionary action, we have yet to see, but we have to keep working at it. And I think that's the real question. Where should we put our efforts now? And that's a real conversation, to have. And this reminds me, I want to open it up because I've been talking quite a bit and I want to hear what you have to say, but it does remind me a little bit of what I saw as a very positive and hopeful orientation that's developed recently, which is being more conscious and valuing the political prisoners as the repression has increased to try and stamp out, because there's been so much response in the streets, on university campuses, on alternate media that has really transformed public opinion. It's been impossible for them to hide the fact that people are disgusted by what's happening and they don't really want to be a part of it. Even if that's still a kind of passive feeling, it has changed the political culture in genuine and real ways. And so as a result, there's been greater repression, and they've tried to make examples of people, to persecute them so that it will be a warning to others to depress us or to kind of discourage people from taking action. But I've seen a very healthy and helpful response when Tuta Hosha, who's one of the Palestine Action activists, who was jailed in a prison in Birmingham, went on a hunger strike. This, for a long time, it didn't get any, news whatsoever. You hardly heard about this, but, suddenly people started, talking about it and putting pressure, and it really mobilized people. And I think that's a very healthy direction, is that you may not be ready to go and do direct action. I'm not going to encourage anyone to do anything, that they can't support and do. But what you can do is support people who have, to make sure that they get, support financially for their trials, to be a support network. And this is one thing that I noticed in PAL Action when I was there during 2023, 2024. I was in the UK on sabbatical, and I attended some of the trials for members of Palestine Action, and they had a whole support network. It's one person may have done a direct action to dramatize that Elbit Systems is a genocidal, entity. But there are 10 people that need to be there in support, raising consciousness, doing support, and so on. And that's something that, I think is positive. And it just reminds me about the importance and significance of political prisoners and of the place of prisons. They've always been, the prison has always been an institution of resistance, in Palestine and in the United States, right?
And education.
And of education, yes, of political education, of other kinds of education, and of resistance. And just reminds me of a recent interview, George Abdullah. I haven't seen too many interviews that he's given, but he gave one recently with Richard Medhurst. And this is somebody who was in prison for the longest period of any political prisoner in Europe, 41 years. He came out, and he's just as defiant, and he was saying, he called out the Arab street, but he also said, hey, leftists in the West, you have a job to do, and we have to answer these calls. And I'm just thinking about, the Georges. I mean, this reminded me of George Jackson as well. I know, Jared, you've done a lot in your sociology of jails and prisons course, building on the scholarship of Orasami Burton's work, The Tip of the Spear, Black Radicalism, Prison, Repression, and the Long Attica Revolt. It just seems to me there are a lot of connections to be made here as we're thinking about organizing. There are things we can do, in this sphere as well.
Yeah, sorry, I was hearing something weird for a second there. No, first of all, I appreciate the comparison, and especially being so far behind in learning about Abdullah's case and his life and struggle, but it just knowing the broad strokes of it, it parallels a lot of what we've seen here in the United States around political imprisonment, including the length of time. 41 years, which is crazy. So it's good that he's able to get out and be of some sound mind and body and be able to participate. Because what we've seen, particularly in this country over the last couple of years, is a lot of the political prisoners from the Black liberation struggle and associated struggles have been let out just in time to die. Which it's been pretty despicable and diabolical, including Rochelle McGee, who had spent, I think, had hit the record, the unwanted record for time in prison, approaching 50 some years, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the exact number, but locked up since 1970. Anyway, when you talk about the two Georges, and a big salute, if anybody has not read Tip of the Spear by Dr. Burton, I really encourage people to do it. My first world struggles here, I've been overburdened with a course load, as is often the case at our illustrious HBCUs. And one of them was to be tasked with the sociology of law and prison courses. And so I have basically turned them into reading sessions of Dr. Burton's work. And I've argued that Tip of the Spear is as much not only an argument around prisons as warfare, but it's also a lesson from my bias in both Black studies and communication studies. It's a tour de force of propaganda and psychological warfare, and the evolution of it that parallels the rise of the field of mass comm research in this country, where essentially the political and military and financial elite of this country have financed and funded studies in how to repress a potentially insurgent population. And they've used prisons, again, as warfare, as a method of doing that, and to suppress prison rebellion and the radicalization of prisoners, and as a mechanism of preventing radicalization in the broader population. And what Burton talks about a lot is the impact that the assassination of George Jackson had on the rise of Attica and the modern prison rebellion movement, or even abolitionist movement. And of course, George's politics, that is George Jackson's politics, were very much international, in recognizing that what was happening to Black people here was an offshoot of what was happening to other oppressed communities and colonized communities throughout the world. And in fact, of course, wrote or paid tribute to the Enemy of the Sun poem the authorship of is now escaping me, but the point being to connect the Palestinian struggle with the Black liberation struggle. And this was found in George's cell after he was assassinated in August of 1971, among many other great writings. But this point being, and just reading about Abdullah a little bit, that the same language is being used. This recognition that the Zionist entity is itself an offshoot of Western imperialism, which is also aggressing upon people all around the world and creating similar conditions that need to be struggled against with solidarity and similarly across these populations. And again, that's why, as I said earlier, Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, I always just say is if anybody honestly wants to know what I think, they should just go ahead and read that. And then watch John Elmer's reporting on electronic intifada. And if there's anything going to bring a smile to your face in all of this, that combo will do it. And I will say just very quickly, since we've talked a little bit about this media environment that's destroying us, I know it sounds corny, but I actually do this stuff. I do make small attempts to recreate a media environment that's very different in my own little space. So I will do things like put DJ Premier beats under an electronic intifada discussion while looking at a George Jackson poster, or then quickly going and reading. I do this stuff on purpose to try to again create a different, as much as possible, cognitive space. And it is selfish in that it is therapeutic, and it does make me smile, and it does give me energy, and it does make me feel like it's not over. Despite all the attempts of the media environment that would like us to feel that way. So,
yeah. And that poem that was attributed to George Jackson was actually written by Sameh Al-Qasim, I think. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful kind of connection between these struggles that I think.
And the energy in the poem, I should have pulled it up, but what I remember from the energy in the poem, it matches George's energy in terms of, I often butcher his quote, but George Jackson had, he had this line about something to the effect, in fact, this I have relatively handy. I loved people, he said. I began to hate when I discovered that the mystification was interjected intentionally. Mm. And that poem very much has that energy. We will be, you are the enemy of me and the sun and all of us. And we will have that. I co-sign that relationship and I don't claim it to be the most mature or even responsible, and I try to be keep it as much as I think is appropriate for public space and maybe in my role as an educator from time to time. But that is the vibe that I appreciate, and that I'm happy to see be brought into communication with one another with those vibes.
Yeah. I think when we look at the basis of the mystification that's interjected, it has to do, looking at it now from my psychology work, where I really try to look at what's at the bottom of those systems of meanings that we live in, whether individual or collective. And capitalist, imperialist political economy makes us live inside systems of meanings that are based on less than, more than, in terms of fundamental human worth and dignity. And on either side of them, on one side, well, you have the colonized mind, on the more than, on the less than, you have the colonizer mind. You find this, of course, in the clinic individually. People who are less than come and see us. People who are more than become politicians and policemen and join the army or something, or the media. And we also have the contradiction between this more than, less than, which is actually an insult to not just humanity, but to the way human consciousness arises, on a scientific basis. And by the way, I'm doing this series of video on my channel that you should all watch about this stuff. And once we get this, we know that the aspiration for sovereignty, for self-determination, individual and collective, is irrepressible. You can't kill it. You know, it's like the resistance says, you can't kill the idea of resistance. What I hear them say is you can't kill this idea of equal worth and dignity. And prison is an education, but the prison of colonialism and neo-colonialism is also an education. And now you have these people, you see it in Gaza. Gaza is like the, you know, the petri dish of it all. You see in Gaza the most educated population in the world that hasn't got the high tech, but has got the technological knowledge to repurpose in tunnels the unspent ordnance in things that makes it unviable for empire to occupy something that, you know, the smallest ever place. I mean, when has empire in the history of empire not been able to occupy such a small place? And that's because of the education. That's because of, you know, the global majority has actually picked up all there is to be picked up about technology and science, which is a good thing because, you know, the West largely stole it from previous civilizations. And now this genie you can't put back into the bottle. And so we need to always keep this picture in mind, because it's, okay, am I going to operate on my own individual level on a less than or more than level, or am I going to recognize my equal worth and dignity as a human being equal to everyone else individually and collectively in terms of communities and nations? And if I choose this thing, which, you know, I can tell you as a clinical psychologist is the way to individual liberation, because nobody is happy to be trapped in this system. Look at Elon Musk. That doesn't look like a very happy guy. You know, he's trapped in a modern system, but that doesn't, I don't want his life, honestly. And once you get this, then someone said there is nothing worse than talking to people about Gaza and see their eyes glaze over. I want to tell you, my friend, there is one thing worse, not to talk about Gaza. That is so much worse. And today, you know, I went to this demonstration against the cycling race. I don't even know what it's called, Grand Prix or something. And there were literally hundreds of people there. And for the first time, last time I went is 4 weeks ago. There's one every week, but, you know, I had some health issues and stuff and I couldn't go. For the first time, people were chanting openly in front of the police, death, death to the IDF. And you could feel like that was it, you know, they were really embodying this particular cry. And we need to think about what that means, because again, you know, when you go, okay, I'm on team equal human worth and dignity, then you know you're living in a narrative war that's constantly on. People will glaze over sometimes, and people will hear sometimes, and you will hear yourself, you know, finding your voice, be it around the water cooler, online, in your organizing space, if hopefully you organize, you know, outside of these online things that we can't openly organize in, then every little counts. There is nothing, you know, it's defeatism to go, oh, we can't help, we can't stop it. We can't stop it, but we can survive another day. If you're in Gaza, you can survive another day. If you're here, you can survive another day. Say another thing, do whatever other action. But even if it's just saying a few words around the water cooler while others' eyes glaze over, you are actually making a difference. They did not call it the flood for nothing. You know, this, we have to really understand metaphorically what it means to call it the flood. What is the flood made of? Billions and billions and billions of little drops of water, some clean, some dirty, some, you know, shiny, some not so shiny, murky, but that's what a flood is made of. And remember that when you put your drop of water on the side of the free people of the world, meaning common human worth and dignity, equal human worth and dignity, you are part of that flood. And a drop of water can't know, you know, when the flood is going to wash everything away. But if you can know there is a drop of water in this particular flow, in this particular movement, then I think your life is worth living and you are never defeated. And finally, I'm 62 years old, so, you know, I've had time to see. I used to I lived in France where everybody, you could be a communist openly, and then for 20 years nobody could say it anymore. And now I see communists everywhere, even too many, because some of them I go. But anyway, never mind. But it's something. It's not a straw in the wind. It's another drop in the oncoming flood, and we don't know where it will come. But remember this. And the one thing I remember from my teenage years as a revolutionary is, being a revolutionary is basically from defeat to defeat until final victory. And if you don't understand this, you're not going to be to have a happy life in this. It's not a movement even. It doesn't need to be a movement. It's a flow of life against death.
I really love and appreciate that framing, Benji. I think that's really helpful. And, like I was saying, kind of in these like moments of real disappointment, I think in whatever movement there has or could be, to remind ourselves that you're absolutely right, that it is a series of defeats and losing battles until finally the war is won. I think keeping that revolutionary optimism, even, when we look at what's happening here in the US, and it is so hard to keep revolutionary optimism afloat in these days. But it is important. And yeah, I appreciate that. And it also reminds me of, the patience, and we've talked about this on Tankie Group Therapy a few times, is like, revolutionaries, there's a different clock that they use. It's not just this one war or one battle that has to be won now, that even as hundreds of thousands of people are being slaughtered and suffering and dying and being injured and orphaned and displaced and all of this. Yes, absolutely. Of course, it has to stop now. It had to stop forever ago. But in the long term, this is like a global, I think, war of attrition by, the wretched of the earth, maybe, if you want to say, against this global system of capitalism and colonialism and empire. And I think also to keep that in mind, there's that great saying, I think it was from Afghanistan, they have the watches, but we have the time. And I love that. And it helps to keep it all in that perspective, even as we're, in agony, because it's happening, and we can't stop it right now.
Indeed. Survival is its own victory, even though it comes with such great pain. So I really want to just give everybody maybe a chance here at the end, as we're coming to a conclusion, for any final thoughts or remarks they might want to make. Also, if you want to direct people to where they can find more of your work and engage with you, but also if you want to highlight any organizations, actions, individuals, events that might make a difference for our audience, that'd be great too. So maybe we can just go around. Benji, I wonder if you have any final thoughts.
Yeah, well, I kind of expressed my final thoughts, but on your last point, go and watch our channel. It's called Resistance is Fertile. I really want people to be interested in my psychology videos. It's called What's Wrong with Western Psychology and How to Fix It. And correct me, I think it's Mao who said a guerrilla fighter must be in the people like a fish in water. If I'm wrong, if I misattribute, please correct me, you learn French. But we need to remember this. And maybe we're just the water, maybe we're not the guerrilla fighters, maybe we're just the water. But one way today that we can provide water is by contributing to those small Gaza fundraisers. I have 3 I accepted to host. Maybe you can put the link, but there's this beautiful initiative. It's called Lifeline for Gaza by a person on Twitter called Lila, and she put together dozens of hours of work to put together a website where on top comes all the verified, small fundraisers for Gaza families and people who have not received money recently. So you can go there and whatever you're going to give, and nothing is too small, $5, $10, nothing is too small. Many of us can give a little bit, and you can give it to those people who haven't received recently. So really go where it's most needed, both in terms of money, but also in terms of keeping the morale alive. I'm in contact with people in Gaza, and Nora, you probably know this. Whenever they're super well informed about what's going on in the world, and whenever they hear about something happening anywhere in the world that may seem ridiculous to us, I couldn't even put my kefir over the rail bars in front of the genocidal cyclists. But to know that we are there, that we're talking about them, that we're doing no matter what small action is super important. So if they get, even $5 to their fundraiser, it's important. You matter. Everything you can do matter. And if it's $1, go ahead and give $1, but do something like this. This is one of the things we Westoids can do. Give a little bit of that labor aristocracy of imperialism cash that has been extracted from our global majority brothers and sisters, and give it back to where it's needed today, which is Gaza.
Nora, go ahead.
Yeah, Lifeline for Gaza is an incredible project, and I also encourage people to donate what they can to the Samir Project, which is just this phenomenal mutual aid organization in Gaza. Just incredible, and it's not just food and water, but they also deliver medical supplies and medications as they can, baby formula, and tent shelters. They're just amazing. And you can find me on Twitter, Nora BF. The Electronic Intifada is on Twitter at Intifada. electronicintifada.net. We're on YouTube and all the Twitch and Rumble and all these places that sound ridiculous. But yeah, we're everywhere. We keep going. And thanks for watching.
No, so this has been great. I appreciate the invitation and being in discussion with everybody here. And I encourage folks to support all of the folks represented here. I can be found at IMIXWHATILIKE, Black Liberation Media. I think also folks should, in addition, all of the organizations that are sort of involved with that platform, I think should be supported. I would also just encourage the National Jericho movement, specific to political prisoners here in the United States, and prison radio, raising up the voices of Mumia Abu-Jamal and other imprisoned intellectuals and freedom fighters. And I think I saw them in the chat. Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, I think, do great work as well. I would encourage people to support that platform. And yeah, and as they say, I'll see you in the whirlwind.
Yes. I want to thank all of you and all of the people in the chat and the discussion. It's really been a vibrant discussion happening there, and it's wonderful to see a lot of familiar names and aliases, whatever they are, but handles that have been recurring in their participation and building a real sense of discussion and community in the chat. It really means a lot to me to see people not only appreciating, not only learning, but participating and sharing with one another. So that's wonderful to have them have all of you here. And also, I just want to, of course, thank all of you, Benji, Nora, and Jared, for all of the wonderful insights and uplifting analysis. It's really been a pleasure. I do want to highlight, I was going to highlight either Samir Project or Lifeline for Gaza, and actually I hope to do with Millennials Are Killing Capitalism and East as a Podcast, a fundraiser very soon for both Lifeline for Gaza to see if we can turn some of the appeals at the top of the list, and get them some support, but also the Samir Project, because in addition to what Nora said about it being a mutual aid group, one thing I've noticed is that they've invested in infrastructural projects to bring like fresh water. It's not just bringing the water, but an infrastructure project to supply water to communities and to build the infrastructure of life for Palestinians to continue to persist and subsist on their land. So important to do things in a collective sort of way. So do support the Samir Project as well. But since those were already taken, I'll just say that talking about the microcosm and the macrocosm, the domestic and the international, or the global, is I do just want to say I'm on the board, and I'm going to be going back to the Bay Area very soon, and so I'll be volunteering as I always do when I'm in town at Rahima Foundation, which is an aid organization, local charitable organization that my mother founded in our garage 30 years ago for refugees and people at that time from Afghanistan. Then there were Somalis and Bosnians and Iraqis and Afghanis again. And, basically the story of U.S. imperial devastation of West Asia. So you can do things like that. And I'm sure there are organizations like that in your local community that you can support people in a dignified and respectful way. Charity isn't what we, consider the best approach. It's not what we want. It's sometimes what this capitalism, capitalist system only allows us to do, but we want to do it in ways that build consciousness about human dignity, empathy, and collective solutions. So you can go to rahima.org and you can make a donation there as well. So again, follow this channel. If you haven't liked, shared, or subscribed to the channel, please do so. You can always, of course, support this channel. But, consider Lifeline for Gaza, Samir Project, rahima.org, media ventures like Black Liberation Media and its associated environment. But let's go out. Let's make a difference. Now is the time. It's a race. It's a race against completion of the genocide. Every day we waste in not stopping the genocide is a day we get closer to the kind of failure we really, as a world, as a people, as humanity, cannot afford. So let's make a difference. Again, thank you all. Until next time, peace with justice and solidarity to you all.
Free Palestine.
Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.